The Laughing Galaxy. The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers sparkled with 1,000 lights as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for their annual summit. Nexus Prime, the neutral world at the heart of civilized space, buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of species docked at the orbital stations above. In the central amphitheater, delegates filled their assigned seats according to ancient protocol. The mighty Corinthians, with their scaled hides and piercing yellow eyes, dominated the military section. The ethereal Vaylari floated in their containment suits, their translucent forms shimmering like living glass. The insectoid Zephyrians clicked and chittered among themselves, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like jewels. At the far edge of the academic section sat Dr. Kes Valoran, her crystalline skin catching the light as she nervously arranged her data tablets. Unlike most of her species, the Altarians, Kes preferred studying the past to contemplating the future. Her colleagues often called her obsession with extinct civilizations a waste of brilliant intellect. Admiral Thex Morden of the Corinthian Defense Fleet stood at the central podium, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. His voice boomed through the translators, carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for over 3 centuries. Fellow beings of the Galactic Council, Thex began, his scaled jaw clicking with each word. Another year passes in relative peace. Our borders remain secure, trade routes flourish, and our combined fleets patrol the known systems without major incident. A murmur of approval rippled through the assembly. The Pax Galactica had held for nearly 800 years, ever since the last Great War had ended with the mysterious disappearance of an entire species that had once threatened the stability of civilized space. Council Prime Nexara of the Vaylari delegation raised a translucent appendage. Admiral Morden, your security report mentions increased sensor anomalies near the galactic rim. Should we be concerned? Thex's expression remained unchanged. Standard deep space phenomena, Prime Nexara. Stellar radiation, gravitational distortions, the usual cosmic background noise. Nothing that poses a threat to our core systems. From the scientific section, Dr. Valoran felt her heart skip a beat. She had been monitoring those same anomalies for months, and they followed patterns that seemed almost deliberate. But she had learned long ago not to voice such thoughts in these chambers. As the formal proceedings continued, the atmosphere grew more relaxed. Delegates shared updates on technological advances, cultural exchanges, and colonial expansions. The mood lightened considerably when Ambassador Zix of the Hegemony Trade Consortium took the floor. Before we adjourn, Zix announced, his 6 arms gesturing expansively, I've brought something to share that I think you'll all find amusing. His translator crackled with what passed for laughter among his species. During our recent archaeological survey of the outer spiral ruins, we discovered more fragments of those ridiculous human artifacts. The chamber erupted in chittering, buzzing, and various forms of alien laughter. Even the usually stoic Corinthians allowed themselves amused rumbles. Oh, not another human myth presentation, groaned Counselor Veth of the Silicon Confederacy, her metallic voice ringing with mock despair. What did they supposedly accomplish this time? Defeat a star, build a galaxy-spanning empire with primitive chemical rockets. More laughter filled the chamber. The human myths had become a running joke among the galactic community over the centuries. Ancient fragments of technology, garbled transmission records, and artistic depictions of bipedal creatures had sparked countless theories about a vanished species that had supposedly once traveled among the stars. Dr. Valoran's crystalline hands clenched involuntarily as she watched her life's work become the subject of mockery once again. She had dedicated decades to studying these artifacts, piecing together linguistic patterns, analyzing metallurgical compositions, and mapping the distribution of human relics across the galaxy. Ambassador Zix activated a holographic display showing a corroded metal fragment covered in strange markings. This piece appears to be from some sort of identification plate. Our translation matrix suggests it reads United Earth Colonial Marine Corps, whatever that means. The absurdity of the name sent fresh waves of amusement through the crowd. United Earth, wheezed Counselor Veth, as if any species could unite an entire planet under one banner. The very concept is preposterous. Prime Nexaris form shimmered with what her species considered gentle humor. These humans certainly had active imaginations. Colonial marines, space navies, planetary governments. They seemed to have planned quite an extensive civilization for a species that never existed. Dr. Valoran could no longer contain herself. She stood abruptly, her movements causing light to refract through her crystalline structure in sharp, agitated patterns. Council members, with respect, the evidence suggests otherwise. The laughter died away as hundreds of eyes, sensors, and optical organs turned toward her. Admiral Thex's expression darkened. Dr. Valoran, surely you're not about to present another of your theories about these fictional beings. Kess felt her respiratory chambers tighten, but she pressed on. The distribution pattern of human artifacts spans 17 sectors. The linguistic consistency across thousands of fragments indicates a sophisticated, unified culture. Their metallurgy shows techniques we've only recently rediscovered. These aren't the remnants of primitive fiction, Admiral. They're archaeological evidence of an advanced civilization. Counselor Veth's optical sensors focused on Kess with something approaching pity. Doctor, your dedication to this fantasy is admirable, but you're building theories on ancient debris and corrupted data. Even if these humans existed, they'd vanished without a trace. No species disappears so completely without leaving proper historical records. Unless they were made to disappear, Kess said quietly, her words carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Admiral Thex's scaled hands slammed down on the podium. That's enough, Dr. Valoran. Your implications border on sedition. The Galactic Council has maintained peace for 8 centuries precisely because we learned from the mistakes of our ancestors. We don't eliminate species, we integrate them. Then where are they? Kess challenged, her fear giving way to decades of suppressed frustration. If humans were just myths, why do their artifacts appear on worlds across the galaxy? Why do the oldest sensor logs from border systems show regular traffic that suddenly stopped exactly 812 years ago? The chamber fell completely silent. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet Kess's intense gaze. Admiral Thex opened his mouth to respond, but his words were cut off by an urgent chime from the emergency communication system. Lieutenant Corex, Thex's aide, rushed into the chamber carrying a data tablet. His scales had paled to an almost white shade, a sign of extreme agitation among Korathians. He whispered urgently in his commander's ear, and Thex's expression transformed from annoyance to shock to something approaching fear. "What is it?" Prime Nexara asked, her form flickering with concern. Admiral Thex looked down at the tablet, then up at the assembled delegates. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from the galactic rim. Unknown configuration, unknown energy signatures. They're heading directly for Nexus Prime. The chamber erupted in confused voices and agitated movements. Dr. Valoran felt a chill run through her crystalline structure as she watched the data feeds appear on the main display screens. The approaching vessels were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They moved in perfect formation, their hull designs sleek and predatory. Energy readings suggested power sources that defied conventional understanding. Most disturbing of all was their number. Initial counts suggested over 1,000 ships of various sizes, from small patrol craft to massive vessels that dwarfed even the largest Korathian dreadnoughts. Estimated time to arrival, Thex demanded. 18 hours at current velocity, Lieutenant Corex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Counselor Veth's optical array swiveled frantically as she processed the incoming data. Their technology readings are off the charts. Power signatures we can't identify. Hull materials that don't match anything in our periodic tables. Who are they? Dr. Valoran stood slowly, her entire body now glowing with an internal light that pulsed in rhythm with her racing hearts. She had spent 30 years studying fragments and theories, building a picture of a lost civilization from scattered pieces. Now, as she looked at the sensor readings displaying impossible technology and perfect military coordination, all those pieces suddenly clicked into place. "I know who they are," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos. The chamber fell silent again, all attention focused on the crystalline scholar who had been mocked moments before. Kess looked directly at Admiral Thex, her glowing eyes reflecting the fear she saw in his reptilian features. "They're not from any current civilization in our databases because they've been gone for 8 centuries. But they never truly disappeared, did they? They were driven out, forced to flee beyond the galactic rim where our sensors couldn't track them." She gestured toward the display screens showing the approaching fleet. "These aren't invaders, Admiral. These are the descendants of the species our ancestors tried to erase from history. The ones we turned into myths and jokes and bedtime stories to scare our young." Prime Nexera's form had gone completely transparent with shock. "You're suggesting those ships are human?" Dr. Valoran confirmed, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "After 800 years of exile in the void between galaxies, the humans have come home." The fleet continued its inexorable approach toward Nexus Prime, their perfect formation and advanced technology serving as a stark reminder that some species, when pushed to the edge of extinction, don't simply fade away. Sometimes they adapt. Sometimes they grow stronger. And sometimes they remember exactly why they were forced to leave. As emergency alerts began sounding throughout the chamber and delegates rushed to contact their homeworlds, Dr. Valoran remained in her seat, watching the sensor displays with a mixture of vindication and terror. She had spent her career proving that humans had existed. Now she was about to discover what they had become during their long exile in the dark. The laughing had stopped. The galaxy was about to learn that some myths have a tendency to return when least expected, and they rarely come back in a forgiving mood. The reckoning arrives. 18 hours had never felt so long, yet passed so quickly. The Galactic Council chamber had transformed into a war room, with holographic displays showing fleet positions, defensive arrays, and communication channels buzzing with activity across dozens of star systems. Admiral Thex stood at the center of it all, his scaled hands moving across tactical displays as he coordinated the largest defensive mobilization in galactic history. Korathian dreadnoughts had jumped in from 3 sectors. Valeri energy weavers phased into position along the outer perimeter. Even the usually neutral Zephyrian hives had dispatched their geometric warforms to join the defense of Nexus Prime. Dr. Valoran remained at her position in the academic section, now surrounded by military analysts eager to hear every theory she had developed about human capabilities. The scholar who had been dismissed as a dreamer just hours ago had become the most valuable intelligence asset the Council possessed. "Doctor," called Commander Zeth, a young Korathian officer with fresh scales and nervous energy. "Based on your research, what should we expect from their weapon systems?" Kess looked up from her data tablets, her crystalline features reflecting the tactical display's glow. "That's the problem, Commander. My archaeological evidence suggests they were innovative beyond measure, but it's 8 centuries old. We have no idea how their technology has evolved during their exile." The main view screen flickered, drawing everyone's attention. The human fleet had stopped just outside the range of Nexus Prime's defensive grid. For long moments, nothing happened. The two forces faced each other across the void, thousands of alien warships forming a protective sphere around the galactic capital, while the mysterious human fleet maintained perfect formation in the darkness beyond. Then, without warning, a single human vessel separated from the main formation and began moving toward the defensive perimeter. It was smaller than their largest ships, but still dwarfed most of the Council fleet. Its hull was a dark metallic gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and subtle blue energy patterns pulsed along its surface like a slow heartbeat. "All stations, weapons hot. Admiral Thex commanded. If they cross the engagement line, we respond with full force. But the human ship stopped precisely at the boundary of the defensive grid, making no aggressive moves. Instead, it broadcast a signal on all emergency frequencies. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Colonial Navy vessel Endurance. We request permission to establish diplomatic contact with representatives of the Galactic Council." The voice was clear, speaking perfect galactic standard without any translator static. But more than that, it carried something that made every being in the chamber pause. It sounded tired. Not weak, not defeated, but worn down by centuries of burden. Prime Nexera's form shimmered as she processed the implications. "United Earth Colonial Navy. Dr. Valoran, didn't that ambassador show us a fragment with those exact words?" Kess nodded, her internal glow pulsing faster. "Colonial Marine Corps, Colonial Navy. They really did unite their entire planet under one government." Admiral Thex activated the communication array. "This is Admiral Thex Morden, commanding Galactic Defense Fleet Alpha. State your intentions, Captain Chen." A pause, then the human voice returned. "We've come to reclaim our place in this galaxy, Admiral. After 800 years of exile, it's time for the truth to be told." The words sent a chill through the chamber. Dr. Valoran felt her worst fears and greatest hopes colliding as she realized the implications of what the human captain had just said. "Exile." Thex repeated, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "I'm not familiar with that historical reference." Captain Chen's response carried a note of bitter amusement. "Of course you're not. Your predecessors made sure of that when they drove us beyond the galactic rim. When they turned us into myths and legends to hide their shame." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several of the older delegates, those whose species had lifespans measured in millennia, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Captain," Prime Nexera interjected, her translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of diplomatic protocol. "If such events occurred, they were before our time. The current council operates under principles of peaceful coexistence and mutual respect." "Peaceful coexistence," Captain Chen repeated, and there was definitely bitter humor in her voice now. "Is that what you call it when an entire species is systematically hunted down, their colonies destroyed, their ships scattered, and their survivors forced to flee into the void between galaxies, when their very existence is erased from your records and turned into bedtime stories?" Dr. Valoran stood abruptly, her crystalline form blazing with internal light. "Captain Chen, this is Dr. Kess Valoran of the Altarian Archaeological Institute. I'd spent 30 years studying human artifacts and culture. Most of my colleagues believed you were extinct or fictional." The communication channel fell silent for several moments. When Captain Chen spoke again, her tone had softened slightly. "Dr. Valoran, we know of your work. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades, and your research papers were appreciated. You kept our memory alive when others chose to forget." Admiral Thex's scales rippled with agitation. "Monitoring our communications? For how long?" "Since the day we left," Captain Chen replied. "We never stopped watching, Admiral. We observed your wars, your peace treaties, your technological advances. We saw how you divided up our former territories, how you erased our colonies from your star charts, how you turned our suffering into entertainment." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter as delegates realized the implications. If the humans had been watching for 8 centuries, they knew everything, every secret, every weakness, every internal conflict that the Council thought was private. Then why return now? Counselor Veth asked, her optical sensors focusing intently on the view screen. "If you've been content to observe from the shadows, what changed?" Another pause, longer this time. When Captain Chen responded, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. "Because we're dying," she said simply. 800 years in the void between galaxies, with limited resources and no new worlds to colonize. Our population has been declining for generations. We've reached the point where we either reclaim our ancestral home or fade into extinction. The admission struck the chamber like a physical blow. Dr. Valoran felt her heart's ache as she imagined generations of humans slowly withering away in the empty darkness between galaxies, kept alive only by determination and the hope of eventual return. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Thex asked, his voice subdued. The answer came not from Captain Chen, but from a new voice, deeper, older, carrying the authority of absolute command. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb, commanding the human expeditionary fleet. What we want, Admiral Morden, is quite simple. We want the truth. We want acknowledgement of what was done to us. And we want our rightful place among the stars restored." The main view screen flickered and suddenly showed the interior of a human command bridge. The beams that appeared were unlike anything the galactic community had seen in 8 centuries, yet unmistakably the same species depicted in ancient artifacts. Admiral Webb was tall and lean, with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries. His uniform was practical rather than ornate, but the insignia on his chest matched the symbols Dr. Valoran had painstakingly translated from archaeological fragments. Behind him stood Captain Chen, younger, with dark hair and an expression that mixed determination with carefully controlled anger. Around them, other humans worked at control stations with an efficiency that spoke of absolute discipline and unity of purpose. "You've changed," Dr. Valoran observed, her scientific mind cataloging the differences between these humans and the artistic depiction she had studied. Admiral Webb's attention focused on her, and she saw something in his expression soften. 800 years of adaptation, Doctor. We learned to be harder, stronger, more unified. We had to, in order to survive. Your technology, Prime Nexera noted, it's beyond anything in our databases. Captain Chen stepped forward. Necessity breeds innovation. When you're exiled to the void with failing ships and dying worlds, you either evolve or die. We chose to evolve. The tactical displays around the chamber suddenly lit up with new contacts. More human ships were appearing throughout the star system, not arriving through conventional means, but simply materializing from what had seemed to be empty space. Cloaking technology, Admiral Thex breathed. "How many ships do you have?" Admiral Webb's expression remained impassive. "Enough, Admiral. More than enough." The numbers climbing on the tactical displays supported his confidence. What had initially appeared to be 1,000 ships was revealed to be merely the visible portion of a much larger fleet. Stealth vessels uncloaked throughout the system, revealing a force that outnumbered the combined galactic defense fleet by a factor of 3 to 1. But what struck Dr. Valoran most powerfully wasn't the display of military might. It was the way the humans carried themselves. There was no swagger, no arrogance, no triumphant gloating. They projected the quiet confidence of people who had endured the unthinkable and emerged stronger. "What happens now?" she asked, voicing the question that everyone was thinking. Admiral Webb looked directly at her through the view screen. "Now, Dr. Valoran, we begin the process of healing. We're not here for revenge, despite having every reason to seek it. We're here to reclaim our place in this galaxy and ensure that what happened to us never happens to another species." He turned his attention to the assembled council. "You have a choice to make. You can acknowledge the crimes of your predecessors, work with us to establish a new accord, and benefit from the knowledge we've gained during our exile. Or you can repeat the mistakes of the past and discover exactly how much we've learned about survival." The threat was implicit but unmistakable. The humans had returned not as the scattered refugees who had been driven out 8 centuries ago, but as a unified, technologically superior force that had been forged in the crucible of exile. Prime Nexera's form flickered with patterns that indicated deep contemplation. What would this new accord entail? Captain Chen answered this time. "Recognition of human sovereignty over our original territories, reparations for the losses we sustained during our exile, and most importantly, a formal acknowledgement of what was done to us, so that history remembers the truth instead of the comfortable lies." The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the demands. They were not unreasonable, but they would require the galactic community to confront a dark chapter in its history that had been buried and forgotten. Dr. Valoran stood again, her crystalline form now glowing with steady, bright light. Council members, I've dedicated my career to uncovering the truth about human civilization. What I've learned convinces me that these beings represent not a threat to our future, but an opportunity to build something better than what we have. She looked directly at Admiral Webb on the view screen. Admiral, your people have clearly evolved far beyond what they were 8 centuries ago. What assurance do we have that you won't repeat the cycle, that you won't become the oppressors you once fought against? Admiral Webb's expression softened, and for the first time, Dr. Valoran saw not the military commander but the man beneath, someone who had carried an impossible burden for longer than most species lived. Because we remember, Doctor. We remember what it feels like to be hunted, to be erased, to watch your children grow up in exile knowing they might never see their ancestral home. That memory is our greatest protection against becoming what we once opposed. The communication channel fell silent as the galaxy held its collective breath. In the space between heartbeats, between words, between the old galaxy and the new one being born, the future balanced on the edge of a knife. The humans had returned, not as myths or legends or ancient history, but as a living reminder that some forces, when pushed beyond all reasonable limits, don't break. They adapt, they endure, and eventually they come home. The age of comfortable lies was ending. The age of difficult truths had begun.